everyone. Welcome to the Five Pods of Xmas. I am digital media editor Warren Fry, and with me today I have.
DCN and JOC editor Lindsey Cole.
And as is tradition around these parts, I'm going to ask you, Lindsey, what you thought were the most significant trends, stories, etc. of 2022.
Well, not to be too punny, but 2022 seems to be, from a news spectrum, the gift that kept on giving.
Oh, that is funny.
So
Yeah.
I know, right? I had to. But in all seriousness, 2022 did have its share of news items across the spectrum that we cover. So obviously, the whole of Canada is what we take a look at. I think there were some major developments over 2022 when it came to the supply chain challenges that, we obviously saw a lot of these factors erupting when the pandemic hit,
hmm
but it continued and continues to this day to be quite challenging. So, you know, I'd say 2022 just gave almost more tangible examples of supply chain challenges that we could see. So, you had projects being derailed, um, completely canceled or postponed. Um, we had concrete shortages. We
hmm
had crazy escalating costs, whether it was steel or lumber still. So, all of these things really gave the industry, a run for their money when it came to trying to be, build these projects. So I'd say supply chains is up there on a top newsmaker for me for 2022. I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention the housing crisis across Canada and where that sits. I know probably some of our staff writers will touch on it too, potentially in their discussions with you. But
hmm
for me, reading all of those stories that come across your desk, we have a real issue. And I mentioned this in my top headlines that I'll be writing this year. Everything has a ripple effect. So, yes, there's supply chain issues. Well, what does that cause? With that and compounding that is a labor shortage. So we have, which is not a surprise to anyone. We all know and we all knew a labor shortage was going to happen, but it is really upon us now. And it's just, we're seeing a lot of things come to fruition and there's been a lot of initiatives to try to tackle things. And obviously, how can houses get built when we have a housing crisis with no labor and the material costs? So everything, you know, revolves around each other in some ways, which is what I noticed as a large trend for 2022. But I think, coupled with the pandemic still causing issues, as well as a lot of, climate related events that impacted things too. We had a bunch of storms in Ontario, in Eastern Canada, and, out west
hmm
that inevitably destroyed a lot of infrastructure as well as residential properties, etc. Then you got to rebuild after that. Well, we're already in a housing crisis and we already have supply chain issues. So all of those things are, again, no pun intended, creating a perfect storm for construction. So those were kind of the more overarching trends and themes that I saw in 2022. But I think it would be important to mention some of the more specific
hmm
um, events, if you will, that occurred that I found to be groundbreaking in some ways for the industry. One of those that really stands out in Ontario is the Ontario election. The results of the election were not surprising. It was fairly certain that Doug Ford was going to get back in. What was surprising was who was standing behind him as
Yeah.
supporters during the campaign. Typically you don't see, for example, LiUNA or the IBEW um, really coming out and jumping behind the Progressive Conservative Party in Ontario.
No,
It's just not
no, it's
something you
just not a
see.
thing. Yeah.
No, that was extremely unique and really interesting from a coverage spectrum for us. Dawn did a great job talking to Joseph Mancinelli from LiUNA, as well as other industry stakeholders, about why they were throwing their support behind the Progressive Conservatives as opposed to the NDP or Liberal parties.
hmm
So that was really cool. Not a twist I saw coming, to be
No,
honest
me
with you.
neither. I was pretty shocked myself.
Yeah, so again, like I said, the results weren't necessarily surprising, but the support was. But I think what's important to mention is, to the Ontario government's credit, a lot of the reasoning behind the union support was because of the initiatives they rolled out before when it came to supporting skilled trades. I mean, OCOT is no more. We have Skilled Trades Ontario now. That was a big booster for a lot of those unions who were supporting Doug Ford. There was a lot of funding announcements, and the Minister of Labor, Monty McNaughton, has really thrown his support and, I would say, enthusiasm behind bolstering skilled trades in the province. So I think it almost, if you look at it, it makes sense as to why they did do so. So that was pretty cool on coverage spectrum. I'd say this was kind of a more interesting story that occurred at the beginning of 2022. Dawn covered it. It was the swing stage inquest that happened on Christmas Eve 2009, where 4 workers died as a result of a swing stage collapse. Obviously, we all know, I've talked about this before. Vince has covered this extensively too. We know that that incident in and of itself set the stage for a lot of occupational health and safety regulation changes in the province.
Right. Yeah.
But in 2022, the inquest finally happened. And I say finally because there was a lot of lead up to this inquest. Delays because of the pandemic, delays because of other things, investigations, lawsuits, you name it. So this finally took place. The industry reaction to it was mixed after the recommendations came out from the jury. To be quite frank, some of the recommendations were not overly groundbreaking. A lot of them are already in place on sites or within government regulation already, because it's been 13 years. But I think the industry was, happy to see some sort of resolution, I guess, if you will, to
Right. Yeah.
an extremely tragic and notable incident that has been a stage setter for many, many changes in the industry. So, from a coverage standpoint, that was days long that Don took part in, and he really covered it very well. And obviously, there's a lot of fact finding in that, as well as listening to some of the victim impact statements, etc. So, I think I would, if I didn't mention that as something in 2022, then I would be missing something. I think a later 2022 development that was, again, kind of groundbreaking, if you will, was the Ottawa LRT inquiry that occurred. I'm sure you heard about it.
Of course, yes.
This has been a beleaguered project. There's no bones about it. The consortium has faced delays, cost overruns. There's been sinkholes. It's been a pretty big
Yeah. And I
debacle, if
follow
you
a
will.
lot of people in Ottawa, and so I see on their social media endless complaints about about that and the rest of the transit system in Ottawa.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is it, right? So, the inquiry came out with some fairly damning, recommendations and results that, place the blame on the consortium, Rideau Transit Group, as well as on City of Ottawa staff and some politicians too. So it was pretty scathing. I think what's important about it, though, that I really did appreciate from the CEO of the Canadian Council for Public-Private Partnerships, Lisa Mitchell. There's been a lot of talk since that inquiry about the merit behind P3s and if they're effective or if they're causing problems, or, should we do them, should we not, for these types of mega projects, and who should have oversight and how much, they did the CCPPP did acknowledge that, there's some great recommendations stemming from the inquiry about, maybe more guidance being given to municipalities when these large projects, and potential oversight too, when these large projects are being carried out. But it's also important to note that the P3 model has been very successful in other areas. So you can't paint everything with the same brush. You just can't. So I thought that was important to note because there's been such a lot of hype around this story that, yeah, there's some projects that don't pan out very well. I mean, yes, I could highlight some issues with the Eglinton Crosstown project too. You just, every project has its own set of issues and you can't overgeneralize. You have to take a look at everything so specifically. So again, from a coverage standpoint, obviously it's a big newsmaker, but I think it's important for us as the, publications of record to also step back and take a look at things on a more overarching level. So that's, I think on the Eastern Canada side, that's kind of the biggies for me. Covering the JOC side of things and editing all the stuff that you and staff writer Evan and Russ, obviously before he left in 2022, what they covered over on the Western side of things. One of the bigger things of note that was unfortunate, that obviously made headlines just recently as well, was that February attack on the Coastal GasLink site that happened, where it was thankfully nobody was really massively injured, but it was a fairly chaotic event.
Yeah, there was potential for violence. Let's put it that
there
way.
was, yeah, there absolutely was. And there's blockades happening to prevent officers from getting to the sites. There's massive thousands upon thousands of dollars worth of damage, and there's no leads. Nobody's coming forward with any information. It's still quite open, and it's frustrating, I'm sure, for those who are a part of it and were impacted by it. So what's unique about the latest development is the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association, I can never say that very well, has stepped forward with $100,000 reward for any information that will lead to the arrest or charges of those who were responsible for it. So that's a story that broke in February and then has kind of almost come to another development. Well, it did come to another development in December. So interesting to see that trajectory, because we did follow it again. I believe in the summertime we tried to do a follow-up just to see where the investigation was going, and as I mentioned, there weren't really any updates to be had. So I mean, that's a big one. I think out west on an industry issue spectrum, I think prompt payment is still a biggie out there. The British Columbia Construction Association and several others have been really pushing for some sort of news on that front. And now with a new cabinet recently sworn in and a new premier, there may be some movement on that front. We'll see. I guess that's something to pay attention to in 2023. So yeah, it like looking back and reflecting on it, 2022 had a lot of things going on.
It's pretty busy. So you mentioned 2023. What about 2023? Are you looking forward to it? I mean looking forward to it as a reporter, not I'm happy this is happening, because that's an easy trap for all of us to fall into.
Oh, absolutely. 2023, what do I think is something to keep an eye on? I think, again, for BC, as I mentioned, prompt payment, but there's some mega projects out your way that I think we should really keep in touch with. We do Site C updates a lot, but I think there's more there we could probably look into. As well as some other bigger projects that you alluded to in Alberta. I think Alberta is an area to keep an eye on too, because we all know the political spectrum there.
It's up in the air as to what's going to happen in May, or March, or whenever they call the actual election.
Right. So definitely should have an eye there, and I think the industry will be too. I'm looking forward to seeing, on a happier spectrum, I am looking forward to seeing more stories and whatnot from Evan. He's our new reporter. I like to see the evolution of him as part of our team, because he's been a great addition and welcome addition. So I am looking forward to that. On the DCN side of things, there's a lot of things we should probably keep our finger on the pulse of. We want to see if there's any more project cancellations or delays or challenges with tenders, for that matter. We're seeing, as I mentioned, the supply chain and material issue is not really subsiding that much. So I think we have to continue to report on the challenges there, as well as maybe some solutions that might be found. I think there's an emerging, it's not even an emerging trend, but there is more coverage than ever before on net zero initiatives climate change initiatives, and what is that going to mean, and when is the industry going to fully adopt these changes? That's something I think will happen in 2023. And I think we're going to see a lot more labor initiatives and issues. So I'm looking forward to kind of seeing where the government's going to turn their attention and how they're going to deal with it. And what I would really love to see is the pandemic being no more. But I think that might also be wishful thinking at this point. Not that it is.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But that's my my take on where things hopefully will go in 2023. Well, maybe not hopefully, but where we might see things go there. So.
All right. On that note, happy holidays to you and a happy new year, and especially to your daughter, who is now just about old enough to start appreciating Christmas.
Absolutely. Elf on a Shelf has been a massive thing. And she is very much looking forward to Santa. So thank you very much for that, Warren. And I want to wish everybody in the industry and all of our supporters a very happy holidays and a safe one too.